I want to thank you for coming and being here with us on this website. The website, whoismarcgafni.com, is a place I want to find out who I am. Who is Marc Gafni? Thank God there's finally a website where I can do some introspection. And I start lightly because we're about to enter into a very serious realm. It's the realm of internet abuse. It's the realm of false complaints. It's the realm of internet smear campaigns. It's the realm of cyberbullying. It's the realm of what early feminists and one philosopher called name rape. It's the realm in which new forms of sexual abuse, the abuse of the sexual, appear that haven't been noticed by culture but are becoming rampant. And I'm here to talk to you in order to take a stand for the evolution of consciousness in public culture. I'm here to break the silence. I've been silent for a decade and not responded to virulent attack, defamation, name rape. And for those of you who are provoked by that term, you should be provoked by it. I understand that, and I'll explain the term, and we'll talk about it together. I've been silent in the face of an incessant smear, base ulterior motivation, malice, and suffered enormously. That, however, wouldn't bring me to put up this website and wouldn't bring me to make this video. My reputation is something that I care about a little bit less every day. I'm here to take a stand for justice. I'm here to take a stand for justice in the face of extremism, in the face of jihad. And jihad is a word that's used in Islamic fundamentalism to describe the killing of the infidel, or the one who's thought to be the heretic or the infidel or the bad one, merely because he differs from the way people think he ought to be, because he threatens something in the dogma of the establishment. And Islamic fundamentalism is about taking down the World Trade Center, killing 3,000 people in a day, because those people are considered infidels. There's no checking of evidence. There's no reasoned conversation. There's no human rights. None of the virtues of democracy, of what we might call the democratic way or the American way, are actually to be found. And so I'm here to take a stand for what our public culture needs to look like. Our public culture needs to be a place of respect, of dignity, of integrity. And our public culture is now slowly becoming dominated by the virtual realm, the realm of the internet. And the internet is becoming largely influenced by hate trolling, by cyberbullying, by vicious attack. There was an activist who began the Arab Spring, which was a number of years ago, and a brief surge, a brief flowering of democracy in the Arab world. His name was Walid Jonim, or Ghonim, I'm not sure how to pronounce his name. And he posted the first picture, a picture of Khalid Said, who was killed by the Egyptian security forces. He posted on the internet, and all of a sudden there was a face. You could see the face of the brutality of Mubarak, Hosni Mubarak's regime, and it flared around the Arab world as a momentary uprising, a momentary flowering of democracy. And then, in Egypt, the Muslim Brotherhood took over, and the army took over, and smear campaigns against each other were launched on the internet. And eventually, the liberal, hopeful possibility that was in this Arab Spring, sparked by this posting on Facebook, disappeared. And Walid Jonim went, as it were, offline for a couple of years. And when he came back, he said as follows. He said, "When this all started, I thought that for the liberation of society, we needed the internet. I now realize for the liberation of society, we need the liberation of the internet." The internet has become a place in which shadow is rampant, in which verbal violence, threats of physical violence, utter distortion of fact, utter willingness to defame, to be brutal, to be cruel, to launch smear campaigns, to cyberbully, right, to allow for that which was impossible before the internet, levels of human brutality, levels of destruction have entered into the realm of genuine possibility. The very institution of leadership is threatened. For a long time, leadership acted with impunity. It could not be challenged. Now we've correctly challenged leadership, but now it's gone too far. Now the challenge no longer has to have veracity. The challenge no longer has to have integrity. No longer needs to be motivated by positive and constructive motivation. Now we can launch a smear campaign against any leader and bring them down merely by attacking them in an organized way in a smear campaign on the internet. So I feel like I have no choice but to respond. I have been attacked. I've been attacked virulently between the end of 2015 and 2016 in an orchestrated smear campaign, which took place in an explosion of blogs, media reports, Facebook postings, Twitter attacks, all of which were orchestrated, organized by a group of people in touch with each other with significant ulterior motivation. Particularly involved in the orchestration were David Inbar, a student who I broke ties with and asked to leave my inner circle, demanded that he leave my inner circle because of egregious ethical violation. My former wife, Chaya, who I left because I fell in love with another woman, who I left because I felt that who she was and who I was couldn't live together, who was offended, hurt, rageful. Chaya Lester came together with David Ingbar, and each in their own different ways were primary catalysts or primary actors, directly or indirectly, in launching and engaging and catalyzing and supporting, however it particularly happened, like the false complaints against me in Israel in 2006. It was claimed all over the press that these were police complaints. That was the assumption of everyone through the system. Indeed, when Chaya Lester spoke to a colleague of mine, and an affidavit about this has been written up, Chaya didn't even realize the absurdity and insanity of her actually directly and indirectly speaking about there being police complaints, when in fact they didn't exist. Chaya told this person directly that she was actually aware of the fact that there were no police complaints, that they never happened, and yet the entire claim made in 2006 by so many of the people involved, it was a given in all the conversations, right, in the press, in the letter written that's published on the web by a key representative of the people involved. There were police complaints. That was a given. There were registered police complaints. That's what we were dealing with. That lie compounded the lie of the content. Because the content of the claimed complaints was categorically not true. But the second they elevated them to police complaints, it changed the entire way we needed to respond to it, because it created danger. Right? In Israel, complaints of sexual harassment are felonies, which are punishable by potentially several years in jail. So to make false complaints, and then again, to compound it by claiming they're police complaints, in a country in which that's a felony of several years in jail, that's an attempt at social murder. It's egregious, right? And since that was all not true, so they've had to cover that up through the smear campaign. Now, I had to go silent in 2006. It took me 2 years to collect the material to repudiate the false complaints. That's why I fell on my sword in 2006, to go silent, to have the ability to recover my computer, find the information that had been deleted, and do whatever I needed to rebuild, right? And to also create, first and foremost, protection, right, from this danger of false complaints and the false claim that there were police complaints. I mean, literally in 2006, everything I had built in my life right, for the last couple of decades. 2 decades of work was destroyed. And I rebuilt, and I recreated. And I tried to open my heart again and again and again. And the sentence that kept going through my mind and my heart and my body was, we live in a world of outrageous pain. The only response is outrageous love. And I went not to attack Chaya or David for what they had done, what they had precipitated, but to move on, to create new structures, to create new possibility. However, David and Chaya were so intent on covering up the fact that the complaints were false, covering up their different modes of participation in the false complaints. Chaya has actually openly admitted and proudly that she's been an organizer of the false complaints. With David, many people have said that he's been the catalyst of the false complaints to me in private conversation. There's quite a bit of evidence for that. It's implicit in things that David said. Clearly, he immediately stood for, supported the false complaints. The false complaints were initiated by a close friend of his. And if you put together 9 or 10 significant pieces of evidence, it was clear, right, that he was a major actor, if not the prime motivator of the false complaints. Wow, that's a big deal. False complaints in Israel of sexual harassment, right, are punishable by jail time. 3-4 years in jail. They'll possibly raped or killed in jail. Right? Men being raped in jail is a big deal. Right? It's tragic. It happens all over America and happens in Israel. It was a genuine threat to my life, to my person. But who cares about my life and my person? Right? It destroyed, right, all the good that we were doing in Israeli society. And so David and Chaya have moved to cover up those false complaints with an 8-year demonization. That demonization exploded in one way in 2011 when allies of David and Chaya tried to manufacture, to contrive, right, an attack. The attack was unsuccessful, but it caused enormous damage. And I'll talk about that in a separate section of this website, the resource section, which talks about the contrived attack of 2011. But it really broke out into the public realm, right? The venom of a perpetual process of demonization broke out in the end of 2015, the beginning of 2016, with an orchestrated smear campaign, in which David and Chaya were the two major faces. People who saw the smear campaign didn't understand that David and Chaya, David Ingbar and Chaya Lester, who were the central public faces of the smear campaign in 2016, were also, directly or indirectly, prime actors in the false complaints in 2006 in Israel. People didn't realize that it was of a piece, and that David and Chaya were actually covering up the heinous nature of making false complaints in Israel in 2006. They were attempting to complete the social murder that they tried to accomplish then. Without that perspective, none of it makes sense. A third party, who was, according to many, the prime orchestrator of the smear campaign, there's a set of emails which indicate clearly, right, that Stephen Dinan, right, the CEO of the Shift Network, was a primary actor in organizing the false complaints. There's other sets of emails, other communications, other evidence, which place him squarely at the center of this. Stephen and I don't know each other. He had a major falling out, which apparently sent him into a rage. It was a falling out with Barbara Marx Hubbard. Barbara, on this website, has detailed what happened between her and Stephen Dinan that apparently provoked his rage and his orchestration, right, of these. Stephen refused any offer to meet. In fact, in this entire process, beginning with the false complaints in 2006, till today, there's been an utter refusal to check facts, to meet, to adjudicate information, to cross-check. All the things that are part of the essential process of democracy, of human rights. The evolution of consciousness that said that there's a not only a legal but a cultural presumption of innocence, that we check information. Who we are as a culture is how we gather information, how our public culture functions. We view Salem witch trials as a regressive meme, as a regressive expression of humanity. We need to move beyond that. Replace witch with sociopath and add on a bunch of first-person testimonies that are unchecked, unchallenged, and unverified. Organize internet attacks. Get a former wife and a former spouse, former lover, former business partner, former student, former colleague. Get the group, the society of the disgruntled together, or a very, very small fraction of a person's life. Use the internet to allow them to hijack the narrative of a person's life. And you get a smear campaign. It's the greatest threat that exists today in culture to the emergence of positive leadership. Positive leadership will be taken down by smear campaigns. I wonder if Martin Luther King could have survived in the internet age. I wonder if so many of the important leaders who affected transformation throughout the centuries could have survived in the internet age. Smear campaigns lack any standard, right? Any way of checking, right? Any regulation, right? Any integrity. And that's the kind of smear campaign that I've undergone. And through that, I've learned a lot about it. Distinctions, insight, understanding, heart-rending agony have all come together. And so although I've survived the smear campaign, I've been damaged, I've been hurt, and I've been devastated, but myself and the Center for Integral Wisdom have survived. Our mission continues, our commitment, our devotion to the evolution of consciousness, our devotion to the evolution of love, our devotion to service, our devotion to integrity remains intact, and we're moving ahead. I could walk away. We could walk away. But we decided at our board meeting this past year that would be out of integrity. That actually this is not a distraction. Responding to the smear campaign is not a distraction from our work. It's the essence of our work. We need to stand for the evolution of love, right, in public culture. We need to stand against demonization with all the advantages that it gives, and we'll talk in one of our videos about the 3 advantages of demonization. We need to stand against false complaints, and we'll talk about the 4 litmus tests for false complaints. We need to stand against hidden malice, which disguises itself behind noble, ostensibly noble motives. We need to talk about the victim triangle, where the perpetrator disguises him or herself, right, as a rescuer or as a victim. All this needs to come to the fore, and that's the purpose of this website. A corollary, a kind of side benefit of the website is it will set the record straight, right, in terms of in relationship to the false claims made about me. I have never sexually harassed anyone in my life. I am not sexually abusive, right, in any way. I've been called a pedophile, a child rapist, a statutory rapist, a confessed child rapist. The list goes on and on, right? It's egregious and sad and tragic in an internet age that one even needs to respond. But those are all egregiously false, categorically. Not one word of truth to any of them, beginning to end. And yet, the organizers of the smear campaign had no trouble, right, deploying the methodology of the big lie, which is a lie plus a lie plus a lie equals the truth. It's time to stand against this. It's time to stand for the evolution of love in public culture. It's time to stand for restoring integrity. And all the people who have stood by passively and watched the smear campaign happen and called me privately and said how terrible it was, that's not enough. You know, Edmund Burke wrote, all that it takes for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing. Let me add to that. Good people do nothing for 1,000 good reasons. They don't do nothing because they're having a tequila sunrise, right, or a scotch on the rocks, right? They do nothing, right, because they're protecting some other work that they're doing. They've got all sorts of legitimate rationalizations and motivations. The same way, Samantha Powers and her excellent book, one of the most important books I've ever written, one of the most important books I've ever read, right? One of the most important books I've ever read, A Problem from Hell, which is the story of genocide in the 20th century and the complete failure of the United States State Department to respond to genocide. It's an incredible book, and it shows the lack of imagination, but also the rationalization, the justification, all the reasons, all the self-interest, which allows us to stand by while other people are massacred. Like one of the great thinkers in Germany said about what happened in World War II. First, they came to take the Jews but I wasn't a Jew, so it was okay. Then they came to take the gypsies, but I wasn't a gypsy, so it was okay. And the list goes on until everyone's taken away. Then they came for me, but there was no one left to protest. All that it takes for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing, and good people do nothing for 1,000 good reasons. So the people who have been bystanders in this story, bystanders because it doesn't affect them, bystanders because they can find a reason to somehow make me wrong enough to rationalize their silence, right, in the face of horrific injustice, a violation of all ethics, a violation of everything that we stand for in the world of spirit, in the world of goodness, in the world of integrity. I urge everybody to speak up, everyone to take a stand, either privately, right, or publicly. It's our turn. It's our turn to stand for integrity. You know, Mark Twain wrote, and perhaps it wasn't Mark Twain, there's an argument about who actually said it, "A lie travels halfway around the world while the truth is putting on its shoes." And my friend Warren Farrell added, and that was before the internet, we need to stand for integrity in public culture. And that's what this website's about. So thank you for being with us. The website's built in a very simple way. It's easily intuitive, easy to follow. It talks about old stories, false old stories that have been perpetrated in the smear campaign. It talks about the false complaints in Israel in 2006. It talks briefly about the contrived controversy of 2011. It talks in great detail about the smear campaign in 2015, 2016. Feel free to peruse the articles, the videos, in each of these sections. In each section, there are two goals. One, just get the facts straight, right? Set the record straight. Simple, objective, true facts. You know, two, if there's any place for me to take personal responsibility for any mistake I've made, I'm delighted to do so. And I want to make that super clear. I'm delighted to sit with anyone at any time, right, who feels that in some moment in relationship they felt hurt. We all hurt each other in the normal arc of personal relationship. I know I've hurt people in personal relationship, and I regret that. And I'm willing to apologize on my knees to anyone who feels hurt. But we got to take mutual responsibility. And you can't use hurt in the normal arc of human relationships as a license to commit murder. That's how the mafia operates, right? You insulted me, I'm going to murder you. It doesn't work that way. That's not the consciousness in which we live. It's not the American way. Right? We fought and died in war after war, right, for the presumption of cultural innocence, for the presumption of personal innocence. We fought war after war for appropriate methods of information gathering. We died on battlefields, right, in order to assert that we don't live in a world of Salem witch trials. We live in a world of human rights. We don't live in a world, right, of public hysteria, right, which then creates mobs, which then put person on trial, right, in the international jury box of the internet. That's not what we believe in. We believe in fair process, both in the legal realm and in the cultural realm. That's our basic integrity. That's the basic goodness for which we stand. Right? That's the American way. That's what we've lived and died for. It's why I'm proud, right, to be part of the democratic world. It's why I'm proud to be an American. And so please feel free to follow the website through any of its sections. There are testimonials, right? There are essays, right? There are videos. Some of the videos are long, in depth. Others are short. There's about 25-minute videos that talk about the basic structure of smear campaigns, the basic structures that underlie, right, these kind of cyber attacks, and why they're critical to repudiate, why it's critical to take a stand, right, for goodness, for love, for integrity. And that's what we're here for. So again, thank you for being with us. This website's not easy for me to speak on. It's not my nature. Those of you who know me know that I'm an activist, but moving right to take firm action against an injustice that someone's done to me personally is super painful for me. I'd rather let it go and move on. And perhaps that's a weakness, perhaps it's a lack in my character, but it's been the way I've always lived. I always have preferred to walk away than to fight. But at this point, I have no choice. At this point, I'm pressed to the wall. At this point, walking away is out of integrity. I've walked away. I've tried to walk away. It hasn't worked. So now I need to stand. I need to stand come what may, right, and speak the truth, because truth needs to be spoken here. Are we all imperfect vessels for the light? Yes, we are. Am I? 1,000%. Have I made mistakes? 1,000%. But mistakes in the normal arc of human relationships. Not the mistakes that are ascribed to me. Not the horrific smear campaign that has been perpetrated for base, ulterior motives, which are sad, which are hidden from the public view, which are disguised under the fig leaf of noble motives. Again, and finally, and in conclusion, if this was just my reputation, literally, I would walk away again and spend the rest of my life writing poetry and essays and perhaps a couple of books. But this is a moment in which my unique self has been challenged, and my unique self does thankfully have the capacity to respond, right, to offer the distinctions, to make the discernments, right, to speak from the heart, and to challenge, right, this desecration of the individual, this desecration of fair process, right, this desecration of all that democracy in America and human rights stands for. So I want to stand against internet abuse. I want to stand against the rape of a name, which is a horror. I want to stand against, right, the bullying, which dominates so many elements of the internet. So here we go. Thank you again and again and again for being with us. Thank you for listening carefully. Thank you for cultivating discernment. Thank you for caring.